Good morning and welcome to the fourth episode of Ahargana. Today I am sitting here on a rock by the side of Holi. This is a stream which is flowing in the Western Ghats. I come this route very often whenever I drive from Bangalore to Mangalore. I come through Shiradi Ghats. This is the shortest cut through the Western Ghats from the Deccan Plateau to the coastal areas. But this time I decided to take a detour, come on one of the small side roads and reach Holi because I look for locations for making these videos. It's a nice day. Last week it was raining extensively, but it's pretty bright and clear, but it's cloudy. I can't hear too many birds here in this region, but I can hear the brook flowing by. It's quiet, it's peaceful. In fact, behind the camera there is a railway bridge. That's how close I am to civilization here, though you cannot make out by looking at the screen. And it's beautiful. I can hear the wind rustling in my ears. It's fantastic. And I didn't even have to take too much effort to get here. Just drive, stop by the side of a culvert and walk a little bit, and here I am. That's how easy nature is accessible to all of us. But I am not here to talk about nature. You all know that, at least not nature on this scale. I am here to talk about nature on a much grander scale. You know, the topic of this video series, Ahargana, is the Hindu calendar. In the last episode, I had said that I will get into the topic of Tithi in this episode. But subsequently, I thought a little bit and I changed my mind, because there is another very interesting topic which this is the right point to bring up now that you know the definition of masas in Chandramana. I have also introduced to you the idea of Amanta and Purnimanta traditions. So this episode is going to be about the variations in the Hindu calendar. Bear with me, I will get to Tithis in the next episode, but this episode is about the variations in the Hindu calendar. Now, to explain these variations, I have to tell you a small story. The story goes back to a very long time back, long ago, so long ago that nobody can say how long ago. There were many kingdoms in our country, and in Madhya Desha, which is today called Madhya Pradesh, there were two kingdoms side by side. You know, Ujjain in those days was the meridian, the prime meridian of the Hindu astronomy. It's like what Greenwich is today, Ujjain was in those days. And there was one kingdom south of Ujjain, another to the north of Ujjain. Now there were two princes in these kingdoms. They grew up together. The one in the south was Nandivarman and one in the north was Dhantivarman. So they grew up, the kings were friendly, the boys grew up together, visiting each other, the neighboring country, the neighboring kingdoms. Everything was fine until they grew up and into manhood. And then something happened and they fell apart. Some people say there was a girl involved. I don't know about all that, those details did not come to me. But they fell apart, they started disliking each other, and the dislike grew and grew and grew. Eventually they became the kings of their respective kingdoms, and still the dislike continued into hatred. And then one fine day, in the court of Nandivarman arrived a messenger. The day was Phalguna Purnima. On Phalguna Purnima, a messenger arrived. He came to Nandivarman and said, "My master Dhantivarman has declared war on your kingdom. And our army is going to attack you on Chaitra Amavasya. Be warned, I have given you fair warning, get ready, we are coming on Chaitra Amavasya." And the messenger went away. So Nandivarman did his calculations. He said, okay, today is Phalguna Purnima, now Phalguna Amavasya has to happen, then Chaitra Purnima, then Chaitra Amavasya. I have 3 more pakshas to go to prepare for defending my kingdom. So he relaxed, or rather he started preparing, but rather slowly. But then to his horror, he found Dhantivarman's army landed up at his gate on Phalguna Amavasya itself, the next Amavasya itself, within the end of that paksha. So he was not ready. His army was defeated, he was captured on the battlefield, he was taken in front of Dantivarman in chains, Bahubali and all that. He was in chains, but he was fuming mad. And Nandivarman accused Dantivarman of perfidy, of adharma. He said, "Hey, Murkha, you told me you will attack me on Chaitra Amavasya. And today is Phalguna Amavasya, you already attacked 1 month early. This is total adharma." Dantivarman responded, "Hey, Muda, can't you even read the Panchanga? This is Chaitra Amavasya today. This is not Phalguna Amavasya, this is Chaitra Amavasya. I did exactly what I told you I would do. I follow Raj Dharma. I warned you, gave you one paksha advance notice, then I attacked and you were not ready. And now you are blaming me of adharma." So Nandivarman is saying today is Phalguna Amavasya. Dantivarman is saying no, today is Chaitra Amavasya. Phalguna Amavasya, Chaitra Amavasya, Phalguna Amavasya, Chaitra Amavasya. Now I ask you, who is right? Nandivarman is right or Dantivarman is right? Or more importantly, is there a possibility that both are correct? That is the topic of today's episode, and I'm going to roll the animation now, and I request you all take a look. Okay, let's get started. In this episode, I want to get into the topic of variations of the Hindu calendar. It's a fairly complex topic, but before I get into that, I will give you a very quick overview, a refresher rather, of the geocentric model of the solar system. So this green circle that you see here is called the ecliptic, and that is the path the sun takes around the earth in 365 days. But when you are observing this from the surface of the earth, you will not be able to see this entire path. You will be able to see only half of it because the other half will be below your feet. And also at the same time, if it is daytime, you will not be able to observe anything in reality because the sun is so bright. Nothing else will be visible. But since Stellarium is a software, I am able to turn off the daylight and I am able to remove the earth from the equation. Also remember from the very first episode that the most dominant movement that we observe standing on the surface of the earth is the spinning of the earth, the rotation of the earth on its axis, which causes day and night, day and night, day and night, again and again and again. But that is not the most important focus of the Hindu calendar and the astronomy behind it. We are interested in certain slower movements of the moon and the sun around the earth. So in order to observe those movements, by removing the earth, I'm not only making the entire ecliptic visible to you, but I'm also eliminating the spinning movement of the earth from the equation. So now we can observe the movement of the slower bodies like the moon and the sun around the earth and look at the definitions of masa and varsha. So this is a quick overview of the geocentric model of the solar system. In this animation now, I'm going to get into a slightly more complex topic, the topic of variations of the Hindu calendar. In fact, this topic is so complex that I prefer to call this the bheja fry topic. Your brain is likely to get fried unless you stay with me, listen carefully and observe the animation carefully as to what is going on here. The starting point of this animation is no different from what it has been before. So we are on April 12th, 2021. It's 3 minutes past 8 in the morning. And it is an Amavasya. Now, according to the Amanta tradition, this is a Phalguna Amavasya. Now, remember, I have already introduced you the Amanta and the Purnimanta tradition. Amanta ends a month with Amavasya and a new month starts. Purnimanta ends a month with Purnima and the new month starts. Now down below I have mentioned the name of the masa according to the Purnimanta tradition, and already you can see the two do not agree. Purnimanta tradition calls this Chaitra masa whereas the Amanta tradition is calling it Phalguna masa. So that means somebody like me will say this is Phalguna Amavasya, whereas the Purnimanta people will be saying this is Chaitra Amavasya. Why is this happening? Observe carefully and things will start becoming clearer. I am going to start this animation now. Here goes. Now we are in Shukla Paksha and both traditions are agreeing it is Chaitra Masa. And we have reached the Purnima of Chaitra Masa, Chaitra Purnima, both traditions agreeing. But here, remember the definition of Purnimanta tradition. They are going to say Chaitra Masa ends with Purnima and Vaishakha Masa starts. And that is what you see here. Purnimanta has switched to Vaishakha Masa, whereas the Amanta tradition continues to say this is Chaitra Masa. So according to the Amanta tradition, this is Chaitra Amavasya, whereas according to the Purnimanta tradition, this is Vaishakha Amavasya. This is why I said this is a Beja fry topic. But this happens only in Krishna Paksha and with respect to Amavasya. Now let me continue the animation. I am in Shukla Paksha now. Both are agreeing it's Vaishakha Masa. So Shukla Paksha is no problem at all. Both traditions agree that this is Vaishakha Masa. Whereas now the Purnimanta tradition will say Vaishakha Masa ends with Purnima and Jyeshta Masa starts. And that is what you see here. The Purnimanta tradition has already moved to Jyeshta Masa, whereas the Amanta tradition stayed in Vaishakha Masa. So every Krishna Paksha, you will see that the Purnimanta tradition has moved to the next Masa already. In this case, Jyeshta Masa. Whereas the Amanta continues to stay with the previous Masa, Vaishakha Masa. So there is one successive Masa name difference happening during Krishna Paksha. This is the crux of the implication of the variation between Amanta and Purnimanta system. This pattern is going to repeat again and again and again. As you can see, Shukla Paksha, they are both in total agreement. Whereas in Krishna Paksha, Purnimanta is shifted to Ashadha Masa, Amanta continues in Jyeshta Masa. Then Amanta catches up with the Ashadha Masa during Shukla Paksha, they are both in agreement. Then during Krishna Paksha again, Purnimanta goes ahead to Shravana Masa. And the next Amavasya, Amanta catches up to Shravana Masa. And until Purnimanta, they are in agreement. And now Purnimanta moves ahead to the next month to Bhadrapada Masa. So this goes on and on and on. Let me continue moving forward. Now Purnimanta has moved to Ashvina Masa. Now Amanta has caught up with Ashvina Masa. Both are in Ashvina. Now Purnimanta has moved to Kartika Masa. Now Amanta has also caught up with Kartika Masa. Another eclipse happened there. Purnimanta moved to Margashirsha Masa. Amanta also now caught up with Margashirsha Masa. Now Purnimanta switched over to Pausha Masa. We are approaching the end of the year. Amanta also caught up with Pausha Masa. Now Purnimanta is in Magha Masa. Now Amanta moved to Magha Masa also. And now comes another interesting point in these variations. Purnimanta has moved to Phalguna Masa. This is the last month of the year, remember, Phalguna Masa. And Amanta continues in Magha Masa. And now Amanta is also in Phalguna Masa. So far so good. We have now come to the Purnima, Phalguna Purnima. Now what's going to happen? Purnimanta will now switch to Chaitra Masa. Now you all know that Chaitra Masa is a new year beginning. It is the first month of a new year. So if I continue the animation now,
Purnimanta will switch to Chaitra masa, which means that I am standing on the cusp of a new year, but only for people who follow Purnimanta calendar, not for the people who follow Amanta calendar. So as a consequence of these two traditions, the dates of new years are going to change. And this should not be surprising to you, because if you are aware, Phalguna Purnima is nothing but Holika Dahan, the day before Holi. So the next day is going to be Holi, and you know that many communities in India celebrate Holi as the start of a new year. Now you know why, because they are the communities who are following the Purnimanta tradition. That's why they say Holi is a new year. This is Holika Dahan, or it's also known as Choti Holi, which marks the end of the previous year. So here goes. Now Purnimanta has moved to Chaitra masa. A new year has already started for people who follow the Purnimanta calendar. And only now with the Amavasya, the Amanta calendar also will switch to the new year. This we have already seen. 1st April 2022, in the previous animation we said that is Yugadi. Now typically the term Yugadi continues to be used for the same, but Holi being a new year has now been explained to you as to why that is a new year, and that happens earlier than the traditional Chandramana Yugadi. So even in Chandramana now there are two new years. One is called the Yugadi and the other is the day of Holi. So this is why I said this topic is a Beja Fry topic. There are a series of variations. The naming of the Amavasyas will change during Krishna Paksha. The month's name will be different, and even the start of the year changes between these two calendars. So why is all this happening? Because there was a flexibility given in the Hindu calendar to start the new year, to start the new month, either at the end of Amavasya or on Purnima. And the moment you give flexibility, standardization goes for a toss and variations start coming in. But that is the way the Hindu calendar has been designed. The flexibility has been given, and you saw the variation and the implications of that variation in this animation. Now, there is another important variation that I need to talk about. It's actually maybe not even right to call it a variation, but it's equally confusing, equally Beja Fry. So if you take the Tamil calendar, the first 2 months are Chittirai and Vaigasi. And somewhere down the line you have Kartikai. And at the end, the 12th masa is Panguni. Now all of these are phonetically exactly the same as Chaitra, Vaishaka, Kartika and Phalguna. Phalguna is Panguni, Chittirai, Vaigasi, Kartikai, Panguni. So you will get a feeling that all the definitions I have given you now, all the discussions we had, completely applies to the Tamil calendar. And if you had that feeling, you would be completely wrong. Because the masas which the Tamil calendar uses are not Chandramana at all. They are Sauramana, and I have not talked about Sauramana so far. But how come then they are using names which sound like Chaitra, Vaishaka, Kartika, Phalguna, etc.? It is what it is. I mean, they are using these names, but what they are really referring to is more familiar to many people as Rashis, Mesha, Rishabha, etc. But instead of calling them Mesha, Rishabha, they are calling them Chittirai, Vaigasi. So when I get to Sauramana and I explain the Rashis, at that time those definitions will become clear. But what you need to remember now is the months of the Tamil calendar which sound, though they sound like Chaitra, Vaishaka, etc., are not the same. They are completely different. I have not gone into their definitions yet. Don't be confused by the names that are being used. The same applies to the Bengali calendar, to the Oriya calendar, and a few more calendars which all use Sauramana for the masas and not Chandramana, but they continue to use names which sound like Chaitra, Vaishaka, etc. Chaitro, Vaishako, etc. I mean, I cannot pronounce Bengali or Oriya perfectly, but you know what I mean. They will sound exactly like Chaitra, Vaishaka, Jeshta, Ashada, Shravana. But no, they are not Chandramana, they are actually Sauramana, they are mapping to the Rashis, and we will discuss that at a later point in time. So that's why I said this is not even a variation of the calendar, it is just that the naming conventions are, how can I say it, confusing. That's the only word I can use here. Instead of using the Rashi names, they used these Nakshatra names, because these Masa names, you know, are derived from the Nakshatras, in which new moon is happening, in which Purnima is happening. And that's how those calendars are being used. But fundamentally, you start getting a feeling now, and that is the feeling I'm trying to convey, that there is a central calendar, a Hindu calendar, but there are variations of the Hindu calendar which are used in different parts of our country and by different communities in our country. They are all following the Hindu calendar, but as you saw between Amanta and Purnimanta, it sets up a strong variation and lot of differences in the way the masas are named. Same with the Tamil, the Bengali, the Oriya calendars also, where they are actually Sauramana, but they actually take names similar to the Chandramana names, and that creates a confusion. But there is, some people say that there are many Hindu calendars. I beg to disagree. There are not many Hindu calendars. There is one, but there are many variations of the one in the absence of a standardization. But this is our culture. This is how the Hindu calendar has been defined and used for many centuries before us. And all I am trying to do is explain to you the fundamentals. So if you understand the fundamentals, then you will be able to start figuring out the variations when you come across them. You will be able to work your way through the variations and understand what they are and how they map to the central Hindu calendar. That brings me to the end of this series of animations. I know it might have been a little bit dense for you, but I have tried to make it as clear as I can. And once again, I thank you for your patience, for staying with me throughout this series of animations, and thank you very much for watching.
Now you know that both Nandivarman and Dhantivarman were correct. Nandivarman was following the Amanta tradition like I do, Dhantivarman was following the Purnimanta tradition. That's why their understanding of Chaitra Amavasya was off by one full masa. Now, the purpose of that story, and by the way, that's a true story. It's truly a story, it did not happen. I just made it up. Now, the purpose of that story is not only to illustrate the variations in the Hindu calendar, but also make us think about how this calendar was used in the distant past. Today we have a single calendar all over the world, right? And that's the Christian calendar. So communicating dates of meetings is no problem at all. But in the past, when India was multiple kingdoms, though we had a single calendar, the Hindu calendar, but it allowed for variations, like we saw in that story. So how were the dates of meetings communicated in those days without any confusion? Yeah, for example, weddings happened across kingdoms. I'm sure trade fairs took place, embassies moved back and forth for diplomatic discussions. How were the dates of meetings communicated without ambiguity? Now, I believe that is only possible if everybody understood the basis of the Hindu calendar. And I believe they did understand the basis of the Hindu calendar. Today we have received that calendar, but we have lost that understanding, and that's what I am trying to recreate in this web series. So that brings me to the end of this episode, and in the next episode I promise I will talk about Tithi, only Tithi and nothing but Tithi, so help me God. And Tithi of course is very fundamental. All our festivals, majority of our festivals are based on Tithi, or the dates are determined and communicated based on Tithi. So once I cover Tithi, that will bring us to the end of Chandramana, and we can proceed to Sauramana, and that is also another variation, Sauramana calendar, Sauramana. So with that, I close this episode. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this episode, please give me a thumbs up on YouTube. Please subscribe to my channel and share the link of this channel with your friends and people on your network who are like-minded and who may like to understand more about this topic. So I look forward to seeing you in my next episode, and until then, take care and bye-bye.